Thank you everybody for being with us. Again, my name is Jerry Hawkins. Welcome to Transformation Tuesdays, our monthly conversation series where we talk to community members about the work that we need to do to end racism in our city, and also to find new ways of building relationships with each other. Really excited today to introduce our guest, but before that, Dallas TRHT's mission is to create a radical, inclusive city by addressing race and racism through the TRHT framework, which includes narrative change, relationship building, and equitable policies and practices. Today, I'm joined by the legendary Dale Hansen.
The old one.
Just to give some of his accolades. Two-time Sportscaster of the Year by Associated Press, four-time Texas Sportcaster of the Year by the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association. So many other accolades.
Well, yeah, don't worry about
it.
Well, thank you. It's what happens if you're around long enough. They get we haven't given you anything lately, so here it is. So
that's right.
But it's been 41 years in Dallas, so it's been fun.
That's amazing. I'm sure you're saying so much in those 41 years. In our Transformation Tuesday series, we talk about different topics. We've had faith leaders, we had folks in media and marketing. Today we're going to focus on race, racism, and sports. And you have been somebody, especially as a young person, seeing an older white man speak out about issues of race and sexual abuse and protecting our LGBTQIA plus community. When did you decide that your platform would be used for more than just what you call stats? Numbers?
Yeah, stats and ball scores and highlights or something. Yeah. No, I've actually been doing it for quite a while. I think the real main focal point was when I was involved in the SMU investigation.
That's right.
Back in '86, and WFAA broke that story. I get a phone call from a woman. Long investigation. We end up, unfortunately, shutting down the SMU football program. And that's when I really. Oh yeah, that was a very, very interesting time in my life. But it was also the time in my life that it played a very big role in really changing the way I looked at sports. Along with the fact that I realized, there's some good that can come from this by using the platform that you mentioned. And I just didn't want to be anymore the guy who simply did ball scores and highlights. And the station, somewhat surprising to many people, gave me that platform to talk about these different issues. And I talked about quite a few things over the years, but nothing really crystallized, at least nationally, until Michael Sana. That was almost 8-9 years ago now. And once I wrote the article,
let's set the context for Michael Sam. Because at the time, even though we know that there have been players who identify as gay in the National Football League, no one had come out yet.
No. There's always rumors and always suspicions, whatever.
And Michael Sam is an amazing football player, University of Missouri, highly ranked defensive player, but came out as gay right before the draft.
Right before the draft,
and set the stage because
well, that's just it. He comes out before the draft, and then all of a sudden he goes from being the SEC, the best football conference in America.
That's right.
The defensive player of the year
in
the best football conference in America.
That's right.
To becoming a late 7th round draft pick.
That's right.
And I still think that had he not come out, he might not have been obviously a high 1st round pick. There were some arguments to be made about his actual size and whatever. But you can't be that good in that league and tell me that there's 300 guys or something better than you. I just don't buy it.
That's right.
And so he falls in the draft, and then obviously he got a cup of coffee with the Cowboys at one point, and a couple other teams along the way, but it never worked out for him. But what you said at the very beginning is that when I wrote about Michael Sam, I don't think I said anything that was brilliant or earth-shatteringly different than a lot of people said. But it was said by an older white guy in Dallas, Texas. And I think that's what resonated with most of the country.
That's right.
Is that there's an ally. And the ally is not that 32 skinny, good-looking young guy with a tight suit in California or New York City. It's an old, fat, white guy in Dallas who likes Tommy Bahama shirts and tennis shoes. And that seemed to resonate. And then that really did enable me to kind of take off and write about more social issues. I've always written somewhat about social issues in a sports-related context, but shortly after that, the station allowed me to kind of just jump into the deep end of the pool on occasion.
Because that went viral, right?
Yeah, whatever that meant at that time.
You and my mom share a distinction that you both were on Ellen.
And your
wife seemed to like that a lot.
That was an incredible moment. I mean, but I was on, I was interviewed on Nightline.
That's right.
I was not even knowing about it. I was put on Nightline in that split screen effect with this black preacher who was absolutely opposed to gay rights in America. And now I'm debating him on Nightline. And I didn't even know we were going to be doing that. But it became relatively simple because he made some incredibly stupid arguments. And my favorite one is he said, I'll never forget, he goes, Mr. Hansen, you don't understand. There are laws against homosexuality, and those laws need to be respected. And then I said, well, you need to remember, sir, there used to be laws against a black man marrying a white woman, and don't even think about crossing the state line with a white woman. Should we still respect those laws? And I couldn't see it, but the ABC host of that program was sitting there just nodding his head when I said it. And the preacher was having a little trouble coming up with an answer for that, which I kind of loved. But it just opened a whole different area. But it really did all emanate from seeing what was happening at SMU in the 80s and realizing that there's more to talk about here than a final score.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you alluded to some historical facts. At Dallas TRHT, we talk about the history of Dallas, particularly starting with Native people here, American Indian people here being removed and massacred from this land that created the city of Dallas, and what happened after that, particularly with slavery and the Confederacy and Civil War. But like me, I hear you are a Midwestern guy from Iowa. And so I've been to Iowa. It's a very homogenous place.
Really? You notice that? You notice that?
Did you have a social conscience growing up in Iowa?
No.
Tell me about you growing up and how to.
I've told this story a lot, and I apologize if people are hearing it again, but it does need to be understood about me. We had one black family in the entire county. I lived in this little farm town of Logan, Iowa. It was about 1,000 people. But Harrison County, Iowa, had one black family, the Matthews family. And you ask about my social conscience. It never occurred to me until several years later, quite frankly, that Billy and Patty Matthews never went to the homecoming dances. They never went to our Saturday night dance, which was above the post office, by the way. They never went to the proms. They never went to any of the school events, because who were they going to date? Who were they going to take? So we'd have the big homecoming parade and the big football game, and then we'd all go to the gymnasium and dance all night. And Billy or Patty just went home. And for whatever reason, that never stood out to me when I was a kid. I wasn't a racist kid, but I had racist leanings, if you will, because that's what I was basically taught. My dad, as I said in the commentary a couple of years ago, my dad used the N-word like it was a proper noun. I think I was 16 before I realized that Hank Aaron's name didn't start with an N, or Willie Mays' name didn't start with an N. And my dad would always belittle these people by using that slur. But he loved Henry Matthews. He loved him. And I said to my dad years later, when I did develop a bit of a social conscience, why do you call Willie Mays and Henry Aaron and Bill Russell and Elston Howard and Ernie Banks and all these other great athletes who you never met? You have no idea what kind of people they really are. But you refer to them in such a heinous way. But the one person of color that you have met, you love that family. You love everything about them. I mean, how do you come to that conclusion? I mean, if you only knew one Muslim, if you only knew one Jewish person, if you only knew one person from California, and they were great people, wouldn't you tend to assume that all the rest of them were too? I mean, for the most part. How would you immediately leap to the attitude of, well, this person's good, but the rest of them are horrible? I mean, it makes no sense. And as I said in my commentary, that kind of thinking will twist your mind if you allow it. And quite frankly, it twisted mine as a 16-year-old, as a 17-year-old. I mean, I never ran around using the N-word. I wrote a speech about race relations my senior year in high school, which is why I could never run for president, because somebody would find it. But I'll tell you, and I've told other people, the title of the speech was, "Let's Face the Facts, Negroes Are Just Plain Troublemakers." And I used all the great arguments that Rosa Parks, it's not a big deal to sit in the back of the bus. James Meredith, you can find another university. He was struggling early on. I left out the part about being beaten up on the way to class, having his dorm room destroyed. You don't need to sit at a Walgreens counter. The food's not that good anyway. Go someplace else. And all these ridiculously simple-minded arguments that I made. But I made it in the proper terms of respect. And my English teacher was a guy named Frank Weiland, and I'll never forget it. I sit down, and everybody in my class, that was the assignment, was to write about racial relations and civil rights in America. And they're using the N-word in class, like no big deal. Our football coach used it on the halftime locker room speeches, whatever. And Frank Weiland looks at me and says, "Mr. Hansen, that might be the biggest pile of shit I've ever heard." And he goes, "But I'm giving you an A- because of the argument, the presentation, whatever." He says, "But I do hope you learn someday." And I eventually did, and not much later, I might add. When I went to the military, I went to the Navy. But that's why I don't blame people as much as some of my more liberal friends think I should. I don't blame the George Washingtons of the world for what they did, because that was somehow considered the norm. Bill Maher said this on a show the other day, that if you were rich and white in 1700, you would have had slaves too. And I think that's a shocking thing to hear, but I think it's somewhat true. Now,
there were rich people who didn't have slaves.
That's true, but not a lot of them. Not a lot of them. And some people were smart enough to realize that. But you can follow that all the way through history. That there's always been, there were people who didn't perform in blackface in 1900. Most people did, well into the 50s. Some of our greatest entertainers.
High school students in Dallas.
High school students in Dallas. They thought it was somehow appropriate. And it was cheered, and it was applauded, and it was considered a great form of entertainment. Now you look back and you go, what the hell were you thinking? And I do. I mean, it's one of my most liberal, one of my smartest men I know in my life makes exactly your argument. there were indeed people who knew that the original sin was the greatest sin.
That's right.
I get that. You know, there's always been people, thank goodness, who drag us to a better place.
That's right.
But at the same time, in the words of the great Chris Rock, I don't agree, but I understand.
Yeah.
And that's what I say when I look back at history. You know, we were segregating the armed forces during World War II, for goodness sake. We're fighting the biggest threat to our society known to man, and yet our most important leaders are saying, but we just can't have the black guys fighting with us.
I just watched 24 hours of World War II.
Right.
And so that was...
I'm watching this movie, I think it was the movie 1917. And these two soldiers had to make this long journey to deliver a message to the troops.
Yeah.
And they got there, and this to me is almost like the political correctness of the 2000s now. They arrived at this U.S. headquarters, and there's all kinds of black soldiers sitting there with all the white soldiers.
Yeah.
And I said, where was that? Where did they go? Because there weren't any.
That's right.
They were segregated. I mean, wrongfully so. But yet and for some reason they just jumped out at me. But you're making an historical movie about something supposedly based on a true story. And yet you felt compelled that when they got to the barracks to deliver the message, there's 3 black guys sleeping over there.
That's right.
And I'm like, no, there weren't. No, not the real documentaries that I've ever seen. You know, now there were, different groups that were fighting and doing their fair share. Why, I have no idea. I mean, this is the other part of that. I mean, think about the historical significance of a man of color being willing to lay down his life to fight Germany, to defend a country that would not remotely defend him.
Before or after the return.
Before or after. And that's one of the attitudes that I started. What an amazing commitment that is. That they went to war to defend a country that would not treat them as a human being. And then even after they returned from war, they were not treated as human beings.
That's right.
And they were continually pushed into the segregated parts of our city, which continued in Dallas, well into the 70s, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
Our universities. I mean, you talk about legends, Darrell Royal at the University of Texas won the last national championship with an all-white team. Recruits his first black player in the early 70s and says, years later, I only recruited the best athlete I could find. And I said on the air, well then, coach, if you only recruited the best athlete you could find, and you didn't recruit a black athlete until 71, I'm thinking you might have missed a couple.
Just a few.
And oh my goodness, I'll probably get the response now, but I mean the hate mail just came flooding in that I would be making fun of. But it's preposterous.
So let's talk about one of those incidents where I know that you got a lot of hate mail.
Yeah.
And that was probably the Kaepernick video.
Oh my goodness.
So you went viral. Even WFAA, the video is like up to 1 million views at this point. As we know, Colin Kaepernick, who was at the time kind of coming back from injury and getting into form, but had took his team to the Super Bowl already. But he had also, similar to you, like gained a social consciousness that he didn't have as a young person. And he felt compelled, particularly with what was happening. I mean, during this time, there's police.
Maybe if we'd have listened to him, we might have avoided a few problems
that's a fact.
upset us.
But there's this police shooting after police shooting. I felt like it.
Yeah.
And he felt compelled to do something. He asked one of our veterans what he should do. And take it from there, because you gave an amazing, compelling story to, I think, particularly to our white audience in Dallas, but also white Americans in general, but to everybody.
Well, it's one of the longest standing arguments we've had in America. People will always say, I believe in protest. I support your right to protest. Just don't do it if it interferes with me.
That's right.
You know, do it out of sight. Do it, well, I mean, it's a silly argument. It's a silly argument. He actually started his protest by sitting down.
That's right.
And talking, I forget, was it Nate Boyer, I think, the veteran. He said, you know, it'd be more effective and better. Just take a knee. Don't sit down for whatever. I'm not sure what the real difference is in that, but okay. Yeah. So he honors the request of the Green Beret,
that's right,
or the soldier anyway. And he simply takes a knee. And it's to me, it's like twofold. One, it doesn't affect me. I mean, what impact does that have on me? He's silently, peacefully trying to bring awareness to an issue that has ravaged America for decades.
That's right.
And then he's basically shut it out of the NFL. The former president calls him an SOB that should be fired. He gets whipped in almost every aspect of his life.
That's right.
And I compare it in many ways to Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
I don't compare it. I'm not comparing Colin Kaepernick to Muhammad Ali because Muhammad Ali to me is way up here.
That's right.
But Muhammad Ali walked away from hundreds of millions of dollars for what he believed, at the very prime of his career, for what he believed in.
Yeah.
How can you not respect that?
Yeah.
You might not agree with it, but how can you not respect that? And I say the same thing about Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
He could have shut his mouth, stood up, and he'd be still making millions of dollars playing football. You're never
into his 40s.
You're never going to convince me that for that long stretch that there were 60-some quarterbacks considered better than Colin Kaepernick.
Still not 60.
I'm saying there's not. Yeah, today I'm not saying there were 30. I think
I'm a Bears fan. I know there's not 60.
There's three right there that could be taken out.
Right? Saying,
yeah. I mean, and for these NFL owners to say, oh no, we're not shunning Colin Kaepernick. We just got these two other guys that we think are better. No, you don't.
Yeah.
I think he's somewhere in the teens, let's say 15, 20.
Yeah.
But you'll never convince me that he wasn't better than certainly every backup in the league. I can't imagine there's a better backup than Colin Kaepernick. But he was willing to pay that price, which again, how can you not respect that? But ultimately, at the end of the day, he did what most people say they want: silent, peaceful protest. He did that. And then he was told, no, not that. No, you can't do that. And as I said in my commentary, protesting is the greatest thing about America. It's the absolute greatest thing about America. Go take a knee in North Korea. Go take a knee in Iran. Go take a knee in Pakistan. Take a knee in Saudi Arabia, for goodness sakes. Good luck with that. That's the countries we want to follow their pattern? No, I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. But I really do stress peaceful as a protest. But protest of and by the definition is to make somebody else inconvenient.
Disruptive.
I mean, John Wiley Price used to picket in front of WFAA studios, and everybody was complaining. And I'd just sit in my car and kind of grin at him, and he'd wave at me walking by. I'd wave at him, and then he got to a point where like, hey, Hansen's basically an ally. Let's stop here and let him pull into the parking lot. Because the point of the protest is to make it inconvenient for somebody else.
That's right. So
and as long as it remains peaceful, how can you not respect the fact that that's the greatest thing about America? You can't do it in most countries in the world. And so that's basically what I said. And as you said, the hate mail was staggering. The hate mail was absolutely staggering. And if you remember, you're not old enough to remember, but like during the Vietnam War protests, they would always say, well, love it or leave it. Get out. Go to another country. Well, no, what country would that be? Because I want to take a knee during the anthem.
Right.
No, this is the only country I can do that. Basically, I mean, no, I love this country so much. In Colin Kaepernick's case, I love this country so much I'm willing to give up millions of dollars trying to shine a light on a problem that haunts us to this day. And instead of acknowledging the problem, addressing the problem, and trying to fix the problem, we responded, we meaning America for the most part, responded by shunning and ignoring Colin Kaepernick. And then as we've seen, his issues continue to be a problem in America. I respect it. I argue with all my conservative friends, that things that don't bother me, I don't care. Why should I care? Back Muhammad Ali back in the 60s, and they hated the fact that he was telling people he's the greatest of all time. I thought he was he was the greatest of all time. But he was funny, he was clever, he was charismatic, he put on a tremendous fight. If you love boxing at all, you had to love Muhammad Ali.
Strategic, right?
And at the same time, he's not in my front yard screaming at me. He's not pointing a finger in my face. What do I care? What do I care? And I don't. And I look at it. Gay rights in America. What do I care? What two men or two women decide to do in the privacy of their home and live their lives peacefully? Why would that bother me? That's the worst thing, you know what we got a problem here. Do people love one another? It sounds harsh to a lot of people when I say it, I think, but the reality is white America created these problems. And it's really up to white America to fix the problem. Yeah. Now, we can't fix it by ourselves, but you certainly can't fix it by yourself.
That's a fact.
You can make all the right arguments and you can lay it out and have the blueprint there as to how America should treat people of color. Yeah. But unless you convince white America of the virtue and the proper response that you're talking about, you can't get there. And it's somewhat true in the gay community, that they can make all the right arguments, but if the straight community or the heterosexual community doesn't come across the line and welcome them into the world, they're not going to get there. They're not going to get there. So I do feel that it was white America that brought the African slave to the States, or what was to become the States. It was primarily heterosexual America, evangelical America, that wanted all people of the gay persuasion to be pushed into and shunned away from society. So consequently, it's up to us to fix that problem. And as people have said to me, and I'm incredibly flattered by it, that you're a hell of an ally. You're a hell of an ally to whether it's people of color or gay, whatever. That's about the best compliment I can get. Yeah. I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy. I want to fix those problems for my granddaughter primarily. My granddaughter's black, and I've seen the discrimination. Right up until they realize she's my granddaughter. Right. And that's not acceptable to her. And it's not acceptable to me. That she has been treated 180 degrees differently in a department store. Right up until they realize she's my granddaughter. Mm-hmm. And then they pushed her to buy the cheaper clothes, the cheaper shoes, whatever. And then when she was a kid in grade school, my daughter had my credit card to pay for it with a note and everything. And all of a sudden the clerk's like, oh, wait a minute, we've got, it's like you remember the Oprah Winfrey story in New York. Yeah. Oprah Winfrey, for goodness sakes. Yeah. And the woman said, well, you can't really afford that. She could buy the whole store, right? She could buy the whole store and fire everybody. That's right. But for no reason that makes any sense to a sensible person, Oprah Winfrey was pushed away from buying the more expensive coats and purses or whatever, based on one thing and one thing only. And that is just a sickness in America that we haven't gotten rid of. So many of my friends say, oh, it's not a problem anymore. Hell, they elected Barack Obama. Racism's over the house. please. I mean, that almost made it worse in many ways. You know? And because and as we've seen over the last 5 years or so, racism's alive and well in America. I mean,
so let's talk about that.
In America.
Because you kind of gave a prelude to what would happen and what was happening, particularly right before the pandemic too. In March 2019, you were honored with the Radio, Television, Digital News Association a Lifetime Achievement Award, joining the likes of folks like Broke Cow and Robin Roberts, Charlie Rose. But you focused on these 3 words. You talked about facts, you talked about lies, and you talked about the truth. And you gave this statement that I want you to talk a little bit more. You said, what we do matters, and what we do is too important to give up now. So at Dallas Truth Racial Healing and Transformation, we focus on telling the truth about the history, particularly Dallas County, but what happened in our country. Why did you mention like the facts, lies,
well,
truth?
It was obvious. I mean, the former president was thriving with the message about blaming the media and we're the enemy of the people and fake news and all the rest of it. And as I said prior to that particular line, we're not the enemy of the American people because we are the American people. We're the sons and daughters of truck drivers and beauticians and cab drivers and farmers and factory workers and everything. I said, we are the American people. But the main point of it is that if we don't stand up to the lies, if we don't challenge the facts, if we don't hold people in power accountable, because as I said in that speech, we know the Congress won't do it. We know that members of the House, members of the Senate, they won't do it. Yeah. We know that the cabinet members won't do it. And we're getting perilously close to the day when the Supreme Court won't do it either. Yeah. And if we allow that day to come to America, where the lies don't matter anymore, then America won't matter anymore either. And it's the foundation that has caused the downfall of every democracy in the history of the world. You find a lie, you promote the lie, you push the lie, and when people start believing the lie, democracy dies. Democracy absolutely dies. And I think it's incredibly arrogant for people in America to think that we are so powerful, that we are so good, that we can't ever face it. That, it can't happen here. Yeah. What happened in Germany in the 30s, it can't happen here. Well, it most certainly can.
So January 6th, right?
January 6th was an indication of just exactly how it can happen, without question. And there again, based on the fact that nobody was willing to challenge the lies were being accepted as conversation. Yeah. And no one, you'd have but this bubble we live in, you'd have a liberal newscaster saying it's a lie. So the people who got their information from the Tucker Carlsons of the world and the Sean Hannitys of the world on Fox, it wasn't a lie to them. Yeah. It was fact. And they live in that bubble. And they choose not to watch CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CNN, whatever. And they believe the lie. Yeah. And it just showed itself, its ugly self, by what happened on January 7th. I think that's one of the most scariest and most heinous days in American history.
100%. I remember watching it.
I
was scaled the Capitol.
I called I have a friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine, but he's also incredibly conservative. He thinks Fox News is a little bit too liberal, and he's starting to get worried about it. But he's a great man. He's just a great human being. With that flaw. But I called him, and I said, so are you happy now? Are you bothered by this now? And his first response is, you didn't say anything about the black protesters when they were rioting. And I said, well, one, I most certainly did. Every time somebody throws a brick through a window during a peaceful protest, it sets the cause back. And I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah,
but
they were met at the Capitol with an army.
Everybody said it. I wasn't the first person to say it.
Yeah.
But if that had been a Black Lives Matter protest,
that's right,
the streets of Washington would have run red with blood.
100%.
They would have been gunned down.
100%.
I don't know how anybody could deny that. But at the same time, it's a false equivalency to say that the occasional black protester throws a brick through a building, which I hate that, looting a store or whatever. But I did speak out against that. I mean, because again, it sets the cause back. And whether I choose to understand it or not is irrelevant. The white conservative doesn't understand it. The white conservative won't accept it. And I think it's wrong. I mean, I absolutely think it's wrong. But it's not as bad as what I saw on January 6th. Not to me, it's not.
Because they were looting too.
But they're looting Congress. And he laughed at me when I said, but you're talking about a Walmart or you're talking about a Taco Bell. I mean, okay, great. They stole some tennis shoes at J.C. Penney or whatever. I mean, and you're comparing that to desecrating one of the most sacred buildings in America, a symbol to the world of who we are.
Confederate flags flying in that building, a building that enslaved people built, by the way.
Right, but it's a false equivalency, but at the same time, I understand.
Yeah.
And that's where these arguments get a little bit of life, and they're allowed to grow. And why I said in D.C. that night, that if we don't stand up, if we don't challenge the lies, because what we do matters, and it is too important to stop now, if we allow ourselves, and we have been in many cases, to be intimidated by the negative reactions of the former president and his acolytes, and people who get on Twitter or send Facebook postings angry at something I've said or whatever, other people, if the news media is afraid to challenge that and do their job, and I do think there are stations around the country who are succumbing to that very pressure for the benefit of that advertising dollar, that's going to paint an ugly picture in America. Because we've seen it. We have a historical reference of how Hitler came to power in Germany. And I don't think it's outrageously stupid, as I've been told, to say that it could indeed happen in America.
That's right. It's the road to fascism.
It's a pretty easy road to drive. When you're struggling to make a living, when you see your companies being moved to other countries, when you see your wages being depressed, when you see people at the top end of the financial structure not paying taxes, and you're paying taxes based on your $45,000 a year or whatever.
More than them.
It's easy to believe in a demagogue. It's easy to believe in it. We've seen it time and time and time again. I'm not saying that anybody's Hitler, although I'm not afraid to say it, but I'm saying there's the blueprint. You reach that person who's not willing to think it through, not willing to consider the alternatives. And I do think it's a blind spot in America that as I like to say, and a friend of mine gave me the original book, we are the worst country in the world, except for all the others. But when you refuse to acknowledge the flaws, because you somehow think you're defending the greatness of America. It's like I've never wanted to make America great again. I want to make America as great as I know it can. And the issues and the problems we've had, they're issues and problems of every day.
So let's
but I want to make America great as it can be, not what some people think it used to be.
Let's talk about that locally, because I was extremely proud of local sports teams. Well, a couple of them, not all of them, because I think some of them are just woefully behind and speaking out on social issues. But very specifically the Dallas Mavs and the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Mavs really reached out into the community, did listening sessions, made bold statements about what they needed to do. Particularly also after, some sex abuse scandals to the Dallas Mavs.
Yeah,
She spoke out against as well too.
Yeah.
But also Dallas Stars, a hockey team, by the way, saying that they want to end racism. What was your take on that, man? Particularly locally, in this environment of Dallas, right? Which is
but the Mavericks to me are the most interesting of stories. I mean, the Dallas Stars are in a unique place. I mean, it's not their fault that it's a white game.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's one or two black players in the National Hockey League. But I think hockey to the black player is just like golf. Golf's a white man's game. Well, how's Tiger Woods doing there? I mean, how do you do? It's the environment that you're exposed to, The Tiger Woods grew up playing golf. He's as good as there's ever been. But guys don't grow up in Canada. Black guys don't grow up in Canada. They say, hey, let's go to the skating rink today or something. But when they do, they can compete. But the Mavericks to me are the interesting story because I don't think their history is all that good. I think Mark Cuban is different. I mean, Mark Cuban is trying to change that culture. Mark Cuban is, but I said this in 1980, I think it was 86, 85, somewhere there. They drafted three foreign white guys, and they still keep doing that. Now, Luka Doncic is fantastic.
It's amazing.
But I think in 1986, they drafted Detlef Schrempf, who really wasn't that bad of a player, Uwe Blab, and Bill Whittington. 3 first-round draft picks. And they took 3 foreign white guys.
That's right.
In a league dominated by American blacks.
That's right.
And they've done it a lot.
A lot, yeah.
And now again, Luka Doncic, Dirk Nowitzki both. Okay, you hit on those.
Yeah, they hit big.
Yeah, you hit big on those.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be something in the Mavericks' history.
There is.
Don Carter, when he owned the team, they were talking about moving it to the Fair Park area.
Yeah.
Well, his fans didn't want to go down to the Fair Park area for an arena. That wouldn't work.
That's the story of Fair Park in itself, right?
Yeah. And until we funnel the money in there and all the rest of it, but I do think there's a history of I hate to call it racism, but I think it is. There's a history of this being an old white guy in Dallas, Texas, that led you to think along some of those lines.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's just a coincidence that they drafted so many white guys for so long in a sport that's just absolutely dominated by American blacks.
Yeah.
So, but Mark Cuban, I think, is a different guy. I mean, and so when that's back to what I said a moment ago. We need people like Mark Cuban. We need people like the Dallas Stars and their organization to reach out and speak out. They won't bring all their fans with them, but they can bring quite a few.
They can.
And the most frustrating part of the whole argument to me is that, and it should be the frustration for everybody, is that it's just a time-consuming process. I want it now. I mean, here it is. How can you argue with this?
I want it yesterday.
You want it 25, 35 years ago. I was trying to tell you earlier that I was 17 years old when my life started to change. And it was at the height of the Vietnam War, the height of the civil rights arguments, the protests, and the cities were burning, and Dr. King's assassinated, and Bobby Kennedy's assassinated. I mean, it was a horrific time in American history. But I absolutely believed that my generation was going to change the world. That we would stop the war, we would feed the hungry and the homeless, we would stop the discrimination against our people based on who they love and who they look like and the religion they follow. The reality is that 55 years later, I think it's a hell of a lot better than it was in 1966. But it's nowhere close to what it should be. And the reality is that I'm going to be dead. And the dreams that I had as a boy are going to die with me. So now my real goal and my real objective is to make sure that my granddaughter and my daughter and my son and my wife and my friends drag that dream forward. Because I don't think this should satisfy you. But America today, compared to America in 1966, if you're a person of color, if you're a gay in the 60s, if you're practicing some of the religions that were still being rejected. But it's better today. Not perfect by any means. Not even close, in my opinion, to what it should be. But it's better.
And I'm going to get to that.
And it's going to be better when I die. It's not going to be nearly what I thought and hoped it would be. But maybe, my granddaughter will pick up the torch.
Let's get to that, because I think some new things are kind of bubbling that particularly black women athletes are bringing to the forefront, which is kind of a focus on the intersection between them being women, being black women, and then like this being great at their sport, right?
Yeah.
So Naomi Osaka, right? Bringing up this mental health conversation. Simone Biles, right? The greatest of all time in her sport, from Texas. And this backlash you received by saying that my head is not in the game, I need to sit this one out. Folks are just saying, how are you doing this? Call her a traitor to her country.
And a national embarrassment. But why am I not surprised that it was a politician in Texas that would refer to this young woman as a national embarrassment? I'm writing a piece about just that. It's a tough argument. Because we celebrate our athletes who fight through the adversity. We encourage them to take painkillers and ignore the concussions. But the real problem here is that secret problem, that hidden problem of brain concerns, panic attacks, which I think it sounds like that's basically what she was dealing with. And for those of us who've never had a panic attack, those of us who don't deal with depression,
don't deal with even the sexual trauma that she's dealt with.
Exactly. But I'm saying, when Dak Prescott broke his ankle, we all step back. We all know what a broken ankle is like. We can all relate to a broken ankle. We can all relate to a torn ACL. We can all relate to a shoulder strain. We can't relate to depression. You can't see it. You can't hold it. You can't define it. You can't show, here's the path to cure it even. We know that, okay, get an operation on your ankle, reset it, rehab it, you'll be back in 6 months or whatever. But we can't see it. And as a result, I think we try to just push it out of our line of sight. We want to ignore it. Simone Biles speaks up and says, I just can't do this. Well, there's this uproar among some people. Oh my gosh, she's a national embarrassment. I said, because what? She doesn't want to entertain me? She doesn't want to jump over whatever you call those things and fall up into the sky, triple twist, double loop, tough,
Doing only skills that she can do that are named after her.
Yeah, but I'm like, what does that do for me? I mean, as I'm saying in my commentary, athletes, all of them, at every level, they can entertain me. They cannot change my life. If America's Olympic team came back with every medal they had in Tokyo, I wouldn't feel one bit better about it. Not one bit. If the American Olympic team came back from Tokyo with no medals, I wouldn't feel one bit worse about America. Not one bit worse. I mean, I was thinking, really? That's the best we can do as a team? I don't care. If the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl, I don't feel better. How's that change my life? I mean, now, if the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl and my next 3 house payments are made by somebody from the Cowboys, hey, I still have house payments. I've still got, to put gas in my car at a ridiculous price. I've still got to hope that my granddaughter, dealing with COVID right now after the vaccination, I hope that she's fine. I got bigger issues than whether or not Simone Biles is able to fall over a pole or balance on a beam or whatever those do. I love it. I think it's an amazing physical feat. But then what I also say in this commentary, from those people who are defending her, and many, many people are, what will they be saying if Dak Prescott wakes up on the morning of the Super Bowl and says, I just can't play today? Luka Doncic on Game 7 of the NBA Finals says, I feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. I can't play. What will they say then? And I don't know if it's going to be a double standard. I hope we don't find out, obviously. I love the games. I love the entertainment value. I love the drama. I love the theater of watching sports. But I don't understand this national identity of a young woman because she's the great vaulter, or a guy wins a gold medal because he's the fastest guy on the planet. You know there'll be another one in a couple of years, right? It's like Dwayne Thomas said about the Super Bowl back in the early, I think it was 72, and Dwayne Thomas was the great running back of the Cowboys. And he said, well, how does it feel to win the ultimate game? And he responded by saying, if it really is the ultimate game, why are we going to play another one next year? Right? And I'm sitting there saying, oh, you're the fastest man in the world. Until the next one. You know, and so I don't. Michael Johnson, the great sprinter from Dallas, an amazing athlete. I mean, heck of a guy. I've sat and talked with him many times. Fabulous guy. Runs his training facility. Oh, never seen anything like it.
Till you say
there'll be another one. You know, Jack Nicklaus won all his trophies. Here comes Tiger. Yeah. There'll be another.
So we have about 3 minutes.
I don't smoke this very well. I can't keep it going. So, yeah.
We have about 3 minutes left. And, you know, unfortunately, and for us, fortunately for you, you're retiring.
Hope it's fortunate for me.
So for folks coming after you, and I'm saying folks that are in your profession or aspiring folks, you know, what advice do you have them in speaking out about social issues, particularly issues of race and racism?
It's hard right now. I mean, I think it's really hard at every station in America because there is this attitude, I think, that's permeating its way through the entire industry. We don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to rock the boat. We want everybody to watch us. We want everybody to like us. It's hard to do a social commentary and not offend somebody.
That's right.
I mean, I don't think it can be done. And I don't know what the future of that holds. In my so-called farewell address, I do talk about this, and that I hope and fully expect that somebody will keep speaking out. At least I hope they do. And by the way, when you do that, you're going to supposedly lose the occasional viewer, and depending on what you say, maybe the occasional advertiser. But that's the problem that I think my industry is facing. Because what you have, especially at the local level, you have a local station that wants to appeal to everybody.
Yeah.
The reality is it can't be done. What the networks have done, primarily the cable shows, they don't care. Fox News does not care one bit about you and me.
That's right.
They don't care. And they're making $1 gazillion.
Yeah.
MSNBC doesn't care about my buddy, the conservative guy.
Yeah.
CNN, they're about the same. They don't care about my buddy either. They say they do, but not much. So they've sliced it off into, well, we're just going to take this piece of the pie and fight over it. But local television news in particular has some of an obligation to appeal to the community. The reality is, I just don't know that can be done. Because, and I've had this come up over the years, write this commentary about this particular topic, but just don't offend anybody. And I wrote one of my producers back one time, and I said, well, I tell you what, you write the first line, just one sentence, just give me one sentence that doesn't offend anybody, and then I'll fill out the rest. He's never responded.
I bet.
Because if you're going to write about gay rights in America, if you're going to write about Black Lives Matter in America, if you're going to write about police shootings in America, if you're going to write about almost any issue that's railing across America right now, you're going to offend somebody. Because if you come out and say, hey, I think the police are doing a great job, and I don't blame the police, and I don't know, whoop, now you've lost it. If you come out and say, I think Black Lives Matter, and we got to rein the police in, oh, now you've lost it.
Yeah.
I think gay rights is an absolute civil right that everybody should be entitled to. Now you've lost the evangelicals, you've lost all of them. And it just, I have always had this attitude, I don't really care. You know, I say what I believe. I've been accused of writing things just for the, what we call it, clickbait, or, you know, to make, I promise you, which ought to scare a lot of people. I've never written or said anything, I mean, other than the occasional joke, but I never write a commentary and say anything that I don't absolutely believe. which, as some of my friends say, that kind of scares the hell out of me, that I would believe such a thing. But I don't write for clickbaits. I don't write for the attention. I write because I think it's important. I think it needs to be said.